Nigel is in South Australia. Hi, Nigel.
Hi, mate.
What are your thoughts, Nigel?
I just have a question. I was reading about human trafficking and being arrested and used for body organs in China the other day. And this doctor rendered a testimony of how he was forced to assist these night patrols, and these doctors and the army guys would just bring in one of these dissidents from China and throw them in the van and remove his organs while he was alive. And he said the doctor saw who was holding him down, said the guy was definitely alive because his eyelids were moving and he was looking straight at him, and it took him many years to get over it. But the question is, how would you deal with somebody that could do that barbaric and abominable thing to another human being? How would you minister to the family of that son or daughter or auntie that these guys have performed on them? How would you explain to them that you're going to show mercy that everybody is entitled to? But how would you minister to the family with that thing?
Let me come to Matthew here, because the imagery there, and apologies to some listeners, but this is reality, isn't it? These things do happen. Matthew, that's an extreme case here, and I imagine that there's got to be some sort of justice that is meted out by civil authorities here. But what are your thoughts for Nigel?
Yeah, horrendous situation. And the whole area of human trafficking is a broad range of really horrendous contexts, and organ trafficking is closely associated. They're not quite the same as human trafficking, but it's part of the problem. And yeah, it's almost unimaginable how someone can do that type of exploitation and abuse against another human being. So yeah, we cry out with God for justice. And then the key question is, well, what does justice look like? How do we get to a point of justice? It's not just an eye for an eye. We can't just take the doctor's liver out and say, well, now it's equal. That doesn't resolve anything. There's some sense of justice restoring shalom. That takes a lot more hard work. So one part of mercy in that context would be, what could have happened 20 years before that changed the trajectory of both those people's lives to avoid the situation in the first place. But so I won't dwell on that too long, because the event has happened and something has to be done about this huge violation of human dignity. And it may well be that the perpetrator is put in jail. Jail is a place that's partly for punishment. It's partly to protect society so that the person can't continue doing what they're doing. But it's also a place for rehabilitation. And so part of the role of mercy would be to say, let's put the person in jail, and while they're there, during that time, let's do some work with that person to help them understand what they did, to help them regain some empathy for their victims, to help bring about some repentance, so that by the time they get out, they don't just go back and do the same thing again, but they are transformed by the confrontation with the consequences of what they're doing. That too is mercy.
Let me just throw something into the mix here. We've got Nigel on the line from South Australia, and he's given a really extreme example here. But, just recently on this program, we were talking about some issues that were developing in the Philippines, and a reflection back to Robert Duterte, who had a policy of having his police shoot drug dealers. Now, that's a dealing out of justice from a dictatorial position. Is there a sense here, and I'll come to you on this, Matthew, that the courts themselves, that there is justice, that the appearance of a court, and we can even give some, biblical foundation for the fact that we have courts and advocates, that actually is, the fact that there is a justice system is in itself a merciful thing, because otherwise you may have dictators just saying, we'll just take the law into our own hands and just shoot them dead. Any thoughts here around the value of a court?
Yeah, that's right. So the court is an important aspect of justice. It's not always, not all courts end up giving just decisions, because courts are about imposing a law, and laws aren't always just. There are unjust laws that sometimes we need to oppose, even as Christians. So courts have an important place to play. They bring order, and the reason for laws and for that aspect of justice is that the order will enable everyone to flourish, that it creates a context in which people are safe. And that's part of God's intention for the world, that the world should be a place where everybody has the opportunity to flourish. And there are cases where courts can't do that, and mercy more properly has an equal role when courts can't impose real justice. They can't restore shalom, and so mercy has an important role to play in conjunction with justice to do that restoration or that reconciliation. Paul says that we're ministers, we're ambassadors of reconciliation. So part of our task is to bring about the good, bring about right relationship, bring about reconciliation between people and God, to bring things back to how they were originally intended to be. And that involves partly the courts, some things that happen outside courts, and also some things that happen systemically, because just putting someone in jail doesn't solve the underlying system that caused the problem. Why did the person find themselves in the role of being an abuser, a human trafficker, a drug trafficker? What's the system that created the context for that? And we need to do some systemic change as well.
Nigel in South Australia, thank you so much for a good contribution. 1-800-316-316.